If this video appeared on your screen right now, it wasn't an accident. Carl Jung would call this moment a synchronicity, one of those meaningful coincidences that reveals something profound unfolding beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. You're here because something inside you has shifted in a way you can't quite name yet, something that feels both like an ending and a beginning at the same time. You've been through something with your twin flame that most people wouldn't survive with their soul intact, the kind of connection that rewired your entire nervous system, that made you question everything you thought you knew about love, about yourself, about what it means to truly see another human being and be seen in return. And then it ended, or transformed, or went silent in a way that left you standing in a psychological territory you never knew existed. But here's what almost nobody understands about the twin flame journey, and what Jung discovered through decades of studying the deepest human connections. There comes a moment in this experience when something fundamental shifts. Not because you finally let go, not because you moved on, not because you found closure. Something shifts because you passed a test that was never announced, never explained, and that most people don't even recognize as a test while they're taking it. This isn't about whether you're still together or apart. This isn't about whether they came back or moved on with someone else. This is about something that happened inside you, a psychological transformation so profound that it changed the very architecture of how you experience love, loss, and your own existence. Jung called this the integration of the divine paradox, the moment when your soul stops fighting what is and starts recognizing what has become. You might have noticed something strange happening lately. Maybe you've been thinking about them less, not because you're forcing yourself to forget, but because the obsessive quality of the thoughts has naturally dissolved. Maybe you can finally look at their pictures or remember conversations without that crushing weight in your chest that used to make it hard to breathe. Maybe you've started feeling something you never expected to feel after this kind of loss. A strange sense of gratitude that exists alongside the grief, or perhaps something even more mysterious has been occurring. You've been attracting different people into your life, people who seem to operate at a frequency you didn't notice before. Conversations have been taking unexpected turns, revealing synchronicities and connections that feel orchestrated by something beyond coincidence. You might be experiencing dreams that feel more like visits than random neural firing, or insights that arrive fully formed, as if downloaded from a source beyond your conscious mind. These aren't signs that you're healing in the conventional sense. This is evidence that you've crossed a threshold that Jung spent his entire career trying to map and understand. The twin flame experience, he discovered, isn't ultimately about union with another person. It's about the alchemical transformation that occurs when two souls create enough friction, enough heat, enough intensity to burn away everything false in each other's psychological structures. And the final test, the one that determines whether this experience destroys you or transforms you, isn't about whether you end up together. It's about whether you can integrate what this connection revealed about the depths of love you're capable of experiencing, the wounds you've been carrying since before you can remember, and the person you're being called to become through this absolute devastation and unexpected grace. Most people fail this test because they spend years trying to get their twin flame back, trying to force the connection to return to what it was, trying to make sense of something that was never meant to make sense in the conventional way. They get stuck in the waiting, the hoping, the analyzing every small sign that maybe, possibly there's still a chance for the fairy tale ending they believed was their destiny. But you're here watching this video, which means something different happened in you. You stopped waiting for them to complete your transformation and started recognizing that the transformation was always about you becoming whole within yourself. You stopped looking for answers outside yourself and started finding them in places you never thought to look before. Jung understood that the twin flame connection serves as what he called a psychological catalyst, a relationship so intense that it forces both people to confront aspects of themselves they've spent lifetimes avoiding. The connection activates what he termed the individuation process in both partners, the journey toward becoming fully conscious, fully integrated, fully themselves. But here's the devastating truth Jung discovered. Both people rarely individuate at the same pace, and sometimes the connection must dissolve or transform radically so that at least one person can complete their journey toward wholeness. If you've been carrying the weight of this connection, feeling like you're the only one still affected while they've moved on effortlessly, if you've been questioning why you can't just forget and start fresh like everyone tells you to do, I need you to understand something that will change everything. Your inability to simply move on wasn't weakness. It was your soul's refusal to waste the profound initiation this connection offered you. What would you say is the most unexpected thing that's changed in you since your twin flame connection transformed? Comment below, because sometimes naming what we've become helps us recognize how far we've traveled from who we used to be. Carl Jung made a discovery about twin flame connections that contradicts almost everything you'll find in spiritual communities and relationship psychology today. He found that the intensity of a twin flame bond isn't actually about the other person at all. It's about encountering a living mirror of your own soul's deepest potentials and most unhealed wounds, walking around in someone else's body. When you met your twin flame, something happened that goes beyond chemistry or compatibility or shared interests. Your unconscious mind recognized in them specific qualities, wounds, and potentials that perfectly matched the frequency of your own unintegrated aspects. Jung called this phenomenon projection at the archetypal level, and it's one of the most powerful psychological experiences a human being can undergo. Think back to that first moment of recognition. Maybe you locked eyes across a room and felt like you'd known them before this lifetime. Maybe you had a conversation that went deeper in 10 minutes than most relationships go in 10 years. Maybe you felt this strange combination of coming home and being terrified at the same time, as if you'd finally found something you'd been searching for your entire life, and simultaneously wanted to run as fast as possible in the opposite direction. That recognition wasn't romance, though romance might have been part of it. That was your soul identifying someone who carried the exact psychological medicine you needed to evolve, wrapped in the exact psychological poison that would force you to grow. Jung understood that the most transformative relationships in our lives aren't the comfortable ones. They're the ones that crack us open and force us to see aspects of ourselves we've been expertly avoiding. Your twin flame wasn't sent to complete you or make you happy, or give you the relationship you always dreamed about. They were sent to show you where you're still fragmented, where you're still playing small, where you're still hiding from your own power and depth and capacity for authentic love. Every quality you fell in love with in them was actually a reflection of your own dormant potential calling you toward activation. Did you love their creativity? That was your own unexpressed creativity recognizing itself. Did you love their emotional depth? That was your own unacknowledged sensitivity seeing itself reflected. Did you love their freedom and inability to be captured? That was your own trapped spirit recognizing what liberation looks like when someone actually claims it. But Jung also understood that we don't just project our light onto others, we project our shadow, all the aspects of ourselves we've deemed unacceptable and spent years repressing and denying. Your twin flame also carried qualities that disturbed you, triggered you, brought up reactions that felt completely disproportionate to the actual situation. Those reactions weren't about them either. They were about encountering your own disowned darkness walking around in another person's body. Maybe their emotional unavailability triggered your deepest abandonment wounds. Maybe their need for independence activated your fears of being alone. Maybe their intensity overwhelmed your carefully maintained control. Maybe their chaos disrupted your need for order. Whatever they did that sent you into emotional spirals wasn't random. It was precision targeted to activate exactly the wounds you came into this lifetime to heal. This is where the twin flame journey becomes truly alchemical. You can't just love the light and reject the shadow. You have to integrate both, which means you have to recognize that everything you experienced with this person, both the ecstasy and the agony, was showing you aspects of yourself that were demanding to be acknowledged, accepted, and integrated into your conscious awareness. The reason twin flame connections feel so consuming is because they activate what Jung called the self with a capital S, the totality of your being that includes both conscious and unconscious aspects. When you're with your twin flame, you're not just relating to another person, you're relating to a living symbol of your own wholeness calling you toward completion. Most romantic relationships operate at the level of ego relating to ego. Two people with compatible personalities trying to build a life together. There's nothing wrong with this kind of love. It's actually quite beautiful and sustainable when both people have done enough inner work to show up as relatively healthy adults. But twin flame connections don't operate at this level. They operate at the level of soul relating to soul, which means they're not governed by the same rules as conventional relationships. This is why trying to make a twin flame connection work using normal relationship advice almost always fails. Therapists tell you to communicate better, set boundaries, compromise, work on trust. And these things matter, but they miss the fundamental nature of what's actually happening. You're not trying to build a sustainable partnership. You're undergoing a spiritual initiation that's using romantic love as its delivery system. Jung observed that many of the most profound twin flame connections never result in lasting relationships. The souls come together with such intensity that they create the heat necessary for psychological transformation, and then they separate so that both people can integrate what was activated. The connection wasn't meant to last forever in its original form. It was meant to catalyze evolution in both people, and sometimes that evolution requires separation. This is where most people get stuck in the twin flame journey. They believe that if the connection was real, if the love was genuine, it should result in union. They spend years trying to make it work, trying to get back together, trying to understand why something that felt so right could end so painfully. They interpret the separation as failure, as evidence that maybe it wasn't really a twin flame connection after all. But Jung would say the opposite is true. The intensity of the separation, the years of being unable to forget, the way this person continues to occupy psychological space long after they've physically departed from your life, these are actually evidence of how profound the connection was. If it was easy to move on, it wasn't a twin flame connection. It was just a relationship that didn't work out. The final test begins the moment you stop trying to get back together and start asking yourself a different question entirely. Not, how do I make them come back? But, what is this experience trying to teach me about myself? The moment that question becomes more interesting than the question of reunion, you've crossed the first threshold of the test. You start noticing that your obsessive thoughts about them are actually thoughts about aspects of yourself you've been avoiding. You realize that the qualities you loved in them are qualities you need to develop in yourself. You recognize that the pain of their absence is actually grief for the parts of yourself that died when you tried to make yourself small enough to keep them comfortable. Something shifts from external focus to internal investigation. You stop stalking their social media looking for clues about whether they miss you. You stop analyzing every past conversation trying to figure out what went wrong. You stop waiting for signs from the universe that they're coming back. Not because you've given up hope, but because you've become genuinely more interested in who you're becoming than in whether they're coming back to witness it. This shift is so subtle that most people don't even notice it happening. One day you just realize that you went an entire afternoon without thinking about them, or that you thought about them but without that crushing sensation that used to accompany every memory, or that you can genuinely wish them well without it feeling like you're betraying your own heart. These small shifts are evidence that you're passing the test. You're withdrawing your projections, reclaiming your power, integrating the lessons that this connection came to teach you. You're not healing from them. You're healing into yourself. And that's when something truly extraordinary starts to happen. Carl Jung discovered something that will completely change how you understand what happened between you and your twin flame. He found that certain connections exist outside of linear time, operating in what he called the eternal realm of archetypes, where all souls exist simultaneously across all lifetimes. When you meet your twin flame, you're not just meeting them in this lifetime. You're encountering a soul you've known across multiple existences, and the recognition you felt was memory, not fantasy. This isn't spiritual bypassing or New Age wishful thinking. Jung approached this from a rigorous psychological perspective, documenting hundreds of cases where people experienced what he termed ancestral memory or collective unconscious recognition. They knew things about each other they couldn't possibly know. They finished each other's sentences not because they were so compatible, but because they were accessing the same deeper source of shared consciousness. You probably experienced this with your twin flame. Moments where you felt like you could read their mind, where you knew they were thinking about you before they texted, where you sensed exactly what they were feeling even when they were miles away and giving you no indication of their emotional state. These weren't coincidences. They were evidence of what Jung called psychic connection at the archetypal level. Most people dismiss these experiences as imagination or projection or wishful thinking. They rationalize them away because accepting them as real would require completely restructuring their understanding of how consciousness works. But Jung refused to dismiss what he observed repeatedly across his decades of clinical practice. Some connections transcend the normal boundaries of individual consciousness, creating what he called a shared psychological field, where both people can access each other's inner experience. This explains why the twin flame separation is so uniquely devastating. You're not just missing another person. You're missing a part of your own consciousness that became accessible through the connection. When they leave, it feels like losing access to dimensions of yourself you didn't even know existed before you met them. You're not being dramatic when you say it feels like losing a limb or missing an organ. You're describing an actual psychological amputation. Jung documented that people going through twin flame separation often experience what he called psychological fragmentation. Parts of your personality that were awakened through the connection don't know how to exist without the other person's presence activating them. You might have discovered new creative capacities when you were together, new emotional depths, new ways of seeing the world. And when they left, those parts of you went dormant again, leaving you feeling incomplete in ways you can't adequately explain to anyone who hasn't lived through this kind of loss. But here's where Jung's insight becomes revolutionary and offers genuine hope beyond the spiritual platitudes about divine timing and necessary separation. He discovered that this fragmentation, as painful as it is, serves a crucial developmental function. The parts of you that were activated through the connection don't actually belong to the connection. They belong to you. They always did. The twin flame simply created the conditions where these dormant aspects of yourself could finally come online. The final test then becomes this. Can you learn to activate these parts of yourself without needing the other person's presence? Can you access your own creative depths, your own emotional capacity, your own spiritual awareness independent of the connection that first revealed these potentials? Most people fail this test because they keep waiting for the twin flame to return so they can feel whole again. They've unconsciously made the twin flame responsible for their own wholeness. You know you're passing the test when you start discovering that you can access those awakened parts of yourself through your own consciousness. Maybe you're writing or painting or making music again, not because you're trying to process your pain, but because the creative channel that opened through the connection is still available to you. Maybe you're feeling emotions with a depth and nuance you never experienced before the connection, and you're learning to hold that intensity without needing someone else to witness it or validate it. Maybe you're having spiritual experiences, moments of profound insight or connection to something larger than yourself, and you're recognizing that while the twin flame might have been the doorway through which you first accessed these states, the doorway was always inside you. They didn't give you these capacities. They reflected them back to you until you could finally see them yourself. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming a whole person by integrating all the fragmented aspects of yourself into conscious awareness. The twin flame connection serves individuation by showing you potentials you didn't know you had and wounds you didn't know you were carrying. But the actual work of individuation can only happen within yourself. The other person can be a catalyst, but they cannot be the source. This is why so many twin flame connections must end or transform into something less consuming. As long as you're together, there's a temptation to keep projecting your wholeness onto them instead of claiming it within yourself. The separation forces you to find inside yourself what you were seeking in them. It's brutal, but it's also the only way to actually become whole rather than just feeling temporarily complete through connection with another person. You're passing the test when you stop experiencing their absence as abandonment and start experiencing it as an invitation. An invitation to discover that everything you loved in them exists within you as potential waiting to be actualized. An invitation to develop the qualities you admired instead of just admiring them in someone else. An invitation to become the person who no longer needs a twin flame to feel complete because you've done the work of making yourself whole. Jung observed that people who successfully integrate their twin flame experience often report a strange phenomenon. They continue to feel connected to the person, but the quality of the connection transforms. It's no longer needy, or desperate, or painful. It becomes something more like appreciation from a distance, recognition of a soul who played a crucial role in your evolution, even if they're no longer present in your daily life. You can think about them with genuine tenderness instead of aching longing. You can wish them well without it feeling like you're giving up on yourself. You can acknowledge that they were probably the most important person you've ever met, while simultaneously recognizing that your life is fuller and richer and more authentically yours now than it ever was when you were together. This doesn't mean you don't still love them. Jung understood that soul-level love doesn't dissolve just because circumstances change or people grow in different directions. You might always love them in some deep chamber of your heart that exists outside of time and space, but loving them no longer means waiting for them, organizing your life around the possibility of their return, or measuring every new person against the standard they set. The love transforms from grasping to releasing, from needing to honoring, from depending to appreciating. And in that transformation, you discover something Jung considered one of life's greatest secrets: the capacity to love deeply without losing yourself, to connect profoundly without becoming enmeshed, to honor what was while fully inhabiting what is. You know you're in the final stages of passing the test when you realize you're no longer checking to see if they're watching your social media. You're no longer composing imaginary conversations in your head. You're no longer waiting for the universe to deliver signs that reunion is coming. Not because you've become cold or closed off, but because you've become genuinely absorbed in your own becoming. The question stops being, when will they come back, and becomes, who am I becoming through this experience? The shift is so profound that it changes the entire trajectory of your life. You're no longer living in the past or the hypothetical future. You're finally fully present in your own existence. Something happens when you've truly passed the twin flame test that Carl Jung documented across decades of studying consciousness. And it's so unexpected that most people don't recognize it as evidence of their transformation. You start attracting entirely different types of people into your life. And I don't just mean romantic prospects. I mean everyone from the cashier at the grocery store to colleagues to random strangers in coffee shops begins interacting with you differently. Jung called this phenomenon energetic signature transformation. When you successfully integrate a profound psychological experience instead of being destroyed by it, your entire energy field reorganizes at a fundamental level. You're broadcasting a different frequency now, and people who are sensitive to these things pick up on it immediately, even if they can't consciously articulate what's changed about you. You might notice people starting deeper conversations with you out of nowhere. Strangers sharing personal stories they don't usually tell people they just met. Friends coming to you with questions about their own relationship struggles or spiritual experiences. It's as if you're wearing an invisible sign that says "safe person for authentic conversation," and people who are hungry for depth can sense it from across a room. This happens because you've developed what Jung termed psychological porosity. You've been broken open by the twin flame experience. And instead of closing off and building walls to protect yourself from ever hurting that badly again, you've stayed open. But it's a different kind of openness now. Not the naive vulnerability of someone who hasn't been tested, but the conscious vulnerability of someone who's been shattered and learned to hold all the pieces together in a new configuration. You're no longer performing the social scripts that most people use to keep interactions safely superficial. You can't pretend to care about trivial conversations when you've touched depths most people spend their lives avoiding. You can't fake enthusiasm for status games and social hierarchies when you've had direct experience of soul-level connection that made all that stuff feel meaningless. This authenticity is magnetic to some people and deeply threatening to others. Those who are ready for more depth in their own lives will be drawn to you like moths to flame. Those who are still invested in maintaining their carefully constructed personas will find you unsettling, too intense, too much. And that's okay. You're not for everyone anymore. You're specifically for people who are ready to stop pretending and start being real. Here's something I need you to reflect on because it might help you see how much you've actually transformed. What's the most honest thing someone has said to you recently that they probably wouldn't have said to the old version of you? Sometimes other people's truth-telling with us reveals that we've become safe containers for depth. Share that moment in the comments if you're willing. But there's something else happening too. Something that Jung found particularly significant. You've probably developed an almost uncomfortable ability to see through people's masks. You can tell within minutes of meeting someone whether they're being authentic or performing. You can sense when someone's words don't match their energy. You can feel the discrepancy between what people say they want and what they're actually choosing through their behavior. This isn't judgment, though people who are still hiding from themselves might interpret it that way. It's clarity. You've done the brutal work of seeing yourself clearly, including all the ways you lie to yourself and perform for others, and now you can't unsee those same patterns in other people. It's like you've been given X-ray vision for psychological authenticity, and there's no way to turn it off. This clarity can feel isolating at first. You're at a party and everyone's making small talk and laughing at jokes that aren't funny, and you can see the desperate performance happening beneath the surface. Everyone's trying so hard to be liked, to fit in, to say the right thing, and you remember being that person just a year ago or 5 years ago or however long it's been since the twin flame experience cracked you open. You feel compassion for them because you know what they're running from, but you also can't participate in the same way anymore. You can't force enthusiasm for surface-level interactions when you know how deep human connection can actually go. You can't pretend you don't see what you're seeing just to make other people more comfortable. And this creates a strange kind of loneliness that exists even when you're surrounded by people. But Jung understood this loneliness as a necessary phase in the individuation process. You're between worlds right now. You've left the collective unconsciousness where most people live, but you haven't yet found your new tribe of people who operate at your frequency. You're in what he called the liminal space, the threshold between who you were and who you're becoming, between the life you used to live and the life that's trying to emerge. This in-between place is uncomfortable and disorienting, but it's also sacred. You're not supposed to rush through it. You're supposed to let it teach you to be comfortable with your own company, to find your center within yourself, rather than through social validation or romantic connection. You're learning that you can be completely alone and still be completely whole, which is a lesson most people never learn because they're too terrified of solitude to sit with themselves long enough to discover what's there. Something else starts happening too. You begin recognizing other people who've been through their own version of the twin flame test. You might lock eyes with a stranger and just know they've been shattered and reassembled too. There's a quality of presence that people develop when they've been to the underworld of their own psyche and made it back alive. And once you have that quality yourself, you can recognize it in others instantly. These recognitions create the strangest connections. Brief conversations that go deeper than friendships you've maintained for years. Exchanges with people you'll probably never see again that feel more meaningful than most of your relationships. Jung documented these encounters as soul recognition moments. Brief windows where two people who've done profound inner work acknowledge each other across the distance of whatever else separates them. You're not looking for these connections, but they find you, and they remind you that while your specific experience with your twin flame was unique, the journey of being cracked open and learning to integrate what emerges is something many people undergo in various forms. You're not alone in your transformation even when it feels like nobody in your immediate circle understands what you've been through. The test continues even after you think you've passed it, because passing the test isn't a single moment. It's a series of choices you make every day to stay committed to your own authenticity, even when it would be easier to go back to sleep, to pretend you didn't see what you saw, to perform the old roles that used to give you a sense of belonging. Every time you choose truth over comfort, depth over superficiality, authentic connection over convenient relationship, you're passing the test again. And every time you pass it, you become more solid in your new way of being. The integration deepens. The transformation becomes less something that happened to you and more simply who you are now. Carl Jung made an observation about twin flame connections that explained something you've probably been experiencing but couldn't find words for. He discovered that these profound soul connections don't just affect your present life. They create what he called temporal ripples that reorganize your relationship with your past, your future, and even your sense of existing in time itself. You've probably noticed that since your twin flame experience, your memory of your past has changed. Not the facts of what happened, but the meaning you assign to those events. Relationships that seemed significant before now appear shallow in comparison. Achievements that once filled you with pride now feel somehow hollow. Versions of yourself that you used to identify with now look like characters you were playing, rather than who you actually were. This isn't just normal memory reconstruction. Jung understood this as a fundamental reorganization of your personal narrative. The twin flame connection gave you access to depths of experience that retroactively changed how you understand everything that came before it. It's as if you're looking at your entire life through a new lens that reveals patterns and meanings you couldn't perceive when you were living through those experiences. You might find yourself having realizations about childhood events that suddenly make sense in ways they never did before. Patterns in your relationships that were invisible now stand out with crystal clarity. Choices you made that seemed random now reveal themselves as part of a larger trajectory, leading you toward the twin flame encounter. Your entire life story reorganizes itself around this central transformative experience. Jung called this the teleological perspective, the recognition that your life has been moving toward specific developmental milestones all along, even when it felt completely random and chaotic in the moment. The twin flame connection wasn't an accident or bad timing or the universe being cruel. It was a destined encounter that your soul agreed to before you were born, an experience necessary for your evolution, even though your ego would have chosen something far less painful. This realization brings a strange sense of peace that coexists with the grief. You stop asking, why did this have to happen to me? And start recognizing this happened because my soul knew I was strong enough to survive it, and wise enough to integrate its lessons. You move from feeling victimized by your experience to feeling chosen for it, and that shift in perspective changes everything. Your relationship with the future transforms too. Before the twin flame experience, you probably had clear plans and expectations about how your life would unfold. Marriage by a certain age, career milestones, a stable partnership, children perhaps, a conventional trajectory that society told you would lead to happiness and fulfillment. The twin flame connection demolished all of that, leaving you standing in the wreckage of your carefully constructed future, wondering what you're supposed to do now. But somewhere in the process of passing the test, you stopped trying to rebuild that old future and started becoming curious about what wants to emerge instead. You're no longer forcing your life into predetermined shapes. You're allowing it to unfold organically, following intuition and synchronicity and inner guidance instead of external should and supposed to be. This requires extraordinary courage because you're walking without a map now. You can't ask your friends what they did, because none of them have been where you've been. You can't follow conventional wisdom, because conventional wisdom doesn't account for people who've been psychologically dismantled and reassembled by soul-level love. You have to trust something deeper than logic, something Jung called the wisdom of the self. The self with a capital S is your connection to the larger intelligence that governs your life beneath the level of conscious awareness. It's the part of you that knows things your ego doesn't know, that's guiding your development according to patterns you can't fully comprehend while you're in the middle of living them. Learning to trust the self instead of trying to control outcomes through ego is one of the most challenging aspects of passing the twin flame test. You're learning to recognize the difference between ego desires and soul calling. Your ego wanted the relationship to work out, wanted to be chosen, wanted the fairy tale ending. Your soul wanted growth, awakening, the destruction of everything false in your psychological structure, so something more authentic could emerge. The twin flame experience served your soul's agenda even though it devastated your ego, and making peace with that requires a radical shift in what you consider success. Success stops being about achieving specific external outcomes and becomes about depth of transformation, authenticity of expression, courage to keep your heart open despite the risk of future pain. You're measuring your life by completely different metrics now, metrics that would make no sense to people who haven't undergone this kind of initiation. Jung observed that people who successfully integrate their twin flame experience often develop what he called synchronistic living. They stop trying to force outcomes through willpower and control, and they start noticing and following the meaningful coincidences that appear when they're aligned with their deeper purpose. A chance encounter leads to a new opportunity. A random conversation plants a seed that blooms months later. A book falls off the shelf at exactly the moment they needed to read those specific words. You're probably experiencing this now if you're passing the test. Life has become more magical, more mysterious, more full of meaning, even though it's also harder in some ways because you can't go back to the unconscious simplicity of your pre-twin flame existence. You've eaten from the tree of knowledge, and there's no returning to the garden of ignorance even if part of you sometimes wishes you could. Your relationship with time itself has changed. Before this experience, time probably felt linear and predictable. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, life moving forward in a steady progression toward distant goals. But during the intensity of the twin flame connection, time became strange. An hour with them felt like minutes. A day without them felt like years. And in the aftermath, time has remained strange in different ways. Some days feel endless, weighted with grief and longing. Other days pass in a blur of activity and distraction. And then there are these eternal moments where time seems to stop completely, and you exist in a state of pure presence, aware of yourself and your breath and your aliveness in a way you never were before all this happened. Jung called this kairos versus chronos, eternal time versus clock time. Most people live exclusively in chronos, measuring their lives by achievements and milestones and age and productivity. But the twin flame experience gives you access to kairos, moments of such significance and depth that they exist outside of linear time. One conversation with your twin flame might contain more growth than a decade of conventional relationship. One moment of soul recognition might teach you more about love than a lifetime of comfortable partnership. You're learning to value quality over quantity, depth over duration, transformation over stability. These aren't the values that society celebrates, but they're the values that make life feel meaningful. For people who've touched the depths you've touched, you can't go back to measuring your life by superficial metrics because you know now what depth feels like, and nothing else quite satisfies the same way. Time becomes more fluid too. Past, present, and future start blending at the edges. You might have moments where you're not sure if you're remembering something that happened or previewing something that's going to happen, or experiencing something that exists in multiple timelines simultaneously. Jung would say, you're accessing the collective unconscious, the realm where all times exist at once and souls can perceive beyond the limitations of linear causality. This can be disorienting, but it's also evidence that your consciousness is expanding beyond its previous boundaries. You're not confined to conventional ways of perceiving and experiencing anymore. You've been initiated into mysteries that most people remain completely unconscious of their entire lives. There's a phenomenon Carl Jung documented that happens to people who've passed the twin flame test, and it's so counterintuitive that most people dismiss it as impossible until they experience it directly. You develop the capacity to hold two seemingly contradictory truths at the same time, without needing to resolve them into false simplicity. You can love someone completely while accepting you're not meant to be with them. You can grieve what you lost while feeling grateful for what you gained. You can acknowledge the relationship devastated you while recognizing it was the best thing that ever happened to your evolution. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psychological ability to contain paradox without fragmenting under the tension. Most people can't do this. They need their experiences to be either good or bad, relationships to be either meant to be or mistakes, people to be either right for them or wrong. The human mind craves binary simplicity because holding complexity is uncomfortable and demanding. But the twin flame experience forces you beyond binary thinking. This person was simultaneously your greatest love and your greatest teacher. The connection was simultaneously the most real thing you've ever experienced and something that couldn't exist in conventional reality. The separation was simultaneously devastating abandonment and necessary liberation. Both things are true. All of it is true. Learning to hold these paradoxes without collapsing into one side or the other is advanced psychological functioning that Jung believed separated individuated people from those still trapped in unconscious simplicity. You're not looking for the single right interpretation anymore. You're recognizing that truth is multidimensional, that experiences this profound contain layers of meaning that reveal themselves over years of integration. This capacity for paradox extends into every area of your life now. You can be completely committed to your own healing while accepting that you're also permanently changed by what happened. You can work actively on yourself while simultaneously accepting yourself exactly as you are. You can want things to be different while being at peace with how things are. These aren't contradictions. They're the natural state of a consciousness that's mature enough to hold complexity. People who haven't developed this capacity find your perspective confusing or even frustrating. They want you to be either completely over it or still suffering, either grateful or angry, either open to love again or permanently closed off. But you're none of those things exclusively. You're all of them simultaneously, and you're comfortable with the messiness of that reality because you've stopped trying to perform emotional simplicity for other people's comfort. Something else happens when you've truly passed the test. You stop being afraid of intensity. Most people organize their entire lives around avoiding intense emotions, intense experiences, intense connections. They choose comfort over growth, predictability over transformation, shallow stability over deep uncertainty. And that's a valid choice for people who aren't ready for more, but you've already been through the fire. You know what it feels like to be completely consumed by feeling, to have your entire identity dissolved, to exist in emotional states so intense you weren't sure you'd survive them. And you did survive. You're still here. That knowledge changes everything. I want you to pause and think about something. What's one thing you do now that you would have been terrified to do before your twin flame experience? Sometimes recognizing our new relationship with fear shows us how much we've actually grown. Drop it in the comments if you feel called to share. You're not afraid of depth anymore because you've already been to the depths and discovered you're capable of existing there. You're not afraid of authentic connection because you've already experienced connection so authentic it destroyed all your defenses, and you're still standing. You're not afraid of loss because you've already lost what felt like everything, and discovered there was something beneath that loss that couldn't be taken away. This fearlessness isn't recklessness. You're not throwing yourself into intensity for its own sake or seeking dramatic experiences to feel alive. It's more like a quiet confidence that whatever life brings, you have the internal resources to meet it. You've been tested in ways most people never are, and you passed. You know what you're capable of now. Jung observed that people who develop this quality often become what he called wounded healers. They can sit with other people's pain without needing to fix it or make it more comfortable. They can witness someone else's darkness without being threatened by it. They can hold space for the full spectrum of human experience because they've lived through their own full spectrum and integrated it. You might find yourself becoming the person people call when they're going through their own dark nights. Not because you have answers, but because you've proven you can be present with questions that have no answers. Not because you're wise in some abstract way, but because you've earned your wisdom through direct experience of the kind of suffering that either destroys people or transforms them into something more spacious and compassionate. This isn't a role you sought or a responsibility you asked for. It's simply what naturally emerges when you've been broken open and learned to transform that breaking into depth rather than bitterness. People sense in you someone who's been where they are and made it through to the other side, and they're drawn to that quality like people lost in darkness are drawn to light. But Jung also warned about something crucial. Being a wounded healer doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for others' healing or taking on their pain as your own. You've learned through the twin flame experience what happens when you lose yourself in someone else's process. You've learned that you can't save anyone, that each person has to walk their own path through their own darkness. So you hold space without trying to rescue. You witness without trying to fix. You offer presence without trying to control outcomes. And this might be the most profound gift you received from your twin flame experience: the ability to love people without needing to manage their journey, to care deeply while maintaining your own sovereignty, to be intimately connected while remaining ultimately separate. Your twin flame taught you this through their absence. By not being who you needed them to be, by not choosing you the way you wanted to be chosen, by maintaining their own boundaries even when it broke your heart, they forced you to learn to do the same. You can be deeply affected by another person without being destroyed by them. You can love someone completely without losing yourself in them. This is conscious love, and Jung believed it represented an evolutionary leap in human relationship capacity. Most people love unconsciously, using relationships to fill voids or avoid themselves or project their unintegrated aspects onto another person. But you've been forced through the twin flame experience to learn to love consciously, to bring awareness to all the ways you were unconscious before. You see now how you projected your own completeness onto them instead of claiming it within yourself. You recognize how you made them responsible for your happiness instead of taking that responsibility yourself. You understand how you confused intensity with intimacy, recognition with compatibility, soul connection with relationship sustainability. And seeing these patterns in yourself with such clarity means you won't unconsciously repeat them in the future. This doesn't mean you're perfect now or that you've transcended human neediness and the desire for connection. You still want to be loved. You still desire partnership. You still feel lonely sometimes and wish things had worked out differently, but you're conscious of all of it. You can feel your needs without being controlled by them. You can want things while not requiring them. You can be vulnerable while maintaining your center. Jung called this the integration of the anima and animus, the inner masculine and feminine energies that most people keep split and projected onto others. When you integrate these energies within yourself, you become whole in a way that makes you capable of relating to others from fullness rather than emptiness. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone to share your completeness with. And paradoxically, this is often when the right people start appearing in your life, not because you've stopped caring about relationship, but because you've stopped being desperate for it. Not because you've closed your heart, but because you've opened it in more mature and conscious ways. You're ready now for something you weren't ready for before. Real partnership with someone who's also done their work, someone who can meet you in the depths you've discovered within yourself. Carl Jung spent the final decades of his life studying what happens to people after they undergo profound psychological transformation. And what he discovered completely contradicts what most spiritual teachers tell you about twin flame connections. He found that successfully integrating this experience doesn't lead to reunion with your twin flame, and it doesn't lead to forgetting them and moving on completely. It leads to something far more mysterious and profound that he called living in the eternal now, while honoring the eternal then. You carry them with you always. but not as an open wound anymore. Not as an obsession or a fantasy or a hope that keeps you trapped in the past or waiting for a future that may never come. You carry them the way the ocean carries ancient rivers, the way your bones carry calcium from stars that died billions of years ago. They're woven into the fabric of who you've become, inseparable from your essence without dominating your present experience. Jung understood that truly significant relationships don't end just because the people involved are no longer in contact. They continue in the inner realm, in the psychological space where all your most important relationships exist as living presences that shape how you move through the world. Your twin flame exists there now, not as the actual person with their flaws and limitations and separate life, but as an archetypal presence that represents everything this connection awakened in you. You might talk to them sometimes in your mind, not because you're clinging to the past, but because they've become a part of your inner council, one of the voices that helps you navigate difficult decisions or challenging moments. You might wonder what they would think about something you're experiencing, not because you need their validation, but because their perspective, or at least your internalized version of it, has become part of how you think. This is healthy integration, Jung would say. The problem isn't that you still think about them. The problem would be if you were still waiting for them, still organizing your life around the possibility of their return, still unable to fully inhabit your present because you're so attached to a past that no longer exists or a future that may never arrive. You know you've fully passed the test when you can wish them genuinely well in whatever life they're living now, even if that life doesn't include you. When you can hope they found happiness and peace and growth even if they found it with someone else. When you can be glad this connection existed without needing it to look different than it did. This requires profound surrender, the kind Jung called ego death and rebirth. Your ego wanted them to choose you, wanted the relationship to work out, wanted to be proven right about the depth of the connection, and your ego had to die to those attachments so that something deeper could emerge. Your soul's recognition that this experience served exactly the purpose it was meant to serve, nothing more and nothing less. The grief becomes sacred when you reach this point. It's not the desperate, grasping grief of early separation. It's more like the tender grief you might feel remembering a beautiful dream that changed how you see the world, even though you can't return to it. There's sweetness in it alongside the sadness, gratitude alongside the sense of loss, a recognition that some things are meant to be experienced and released, not possessed and maintained. Jung documented that people who reach this stage often experience what he called spontaneous forgiveness. Not the forced forgiveness that spiritual teachers tell you should practice, but a natural dissolving of resentment and blame that happens when you've integrated the lessons the connection came to teach. You stop needing them to apologize or acknowledge what happened between you. You stop needing them to see or understand or validate your experience. You've become your own validator. You know what you experienced. You know what was real. You don't need anyone else's confirmation or acknowledgement because you've learned to trust your own inner knowing. This is one of the most valuable gifts the twin flame experience gave you, the ability to validate your own experience without requiring external agreement. Most people spend their lives seeking validation from others, changing their stories to match what people want to hear, doubting their own perception when it conflicts with someone else's narrative. But you've been through something so profound that you can't doubt it even when other people don't understand or believe you. You know what you know, and that unshakable inner knowing becomes the foundation for everything else you build going forward. Something else happens at this stage that Jung found particularly significant. You often attract new relationships that mirror the gifts of the twin flame connection without the devastation. You meet people who can match your depth, who've done their own inner work, who are capable of authentic connection without the chaos and intensity that characterized your twin flame experience. These relationships might not have the same mythic quality, the same sense of destiny and soul recognition across lifetimes, but they have something perhaps more valuable: sustainability, reciprocity, mutual respect, the ability to actually build something together in the real world rather than just touching profound depths in fleeting moments before everything falls apart. Jung would say this is evidence that you've successfully integrated the twin flame lessons. You're no longer addicted to intensity for its own sake. You're no longer confusing chemistry with compatibility or soul recognition with relationship viability. You can appreciate depth and authenticity in relationships that also offer stability and consistency and genuine partnership. You might feel guilty about this at first, as if appreciating someone else means betraying your twin flame or diminishing what you experienced with them. But Jung would remind you that growth requires letting go of what no longer serves, even when what you're releasing is precious and sacred, and was once the most important thing in your world. Honoring your twin flame doesn't mean remaining forever attached to them. It means carrying forward the gifts they gave you, living the lessons they taught you, embodying the transformation they catalyzed in you. The best way to honor that connection is to actually live differently because of it, to let it change you in ways that make your entire life richer and deeper and more authentic. You might realize at some point that you haven't thought about them in days or even weeks. And when you do think about them, it's with this peaceful fondness rather than the aching longing that used to accompany every memory. This doesn't mean you loved them any less. It means you've finally processed and integrated an experience that was too big to carry in its raw form. Jung compared this to how the body processes food. You consume something, you extract the nutrients, you eliminate what you can't use. The twin flame experience was psychological food of the richest kind, packed with nutrients for your soul's growth. You've been digesting it for months or years, and now you're finally assimilating what you need and releasing what you don't. The releasing isn't forgetting, it's completion. It's the natural end of a cycle that needed to complete so a new cycle could begin. You don't forget your childhood, but you're not still living in it either. You don't forget your education, but you're not still going to school. You don't forget your twin flame, but you're not still in the relationship or mourning its loss the way you were at the beginning. You've moved through the stages of grief that Jung mapped so carefully: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But what he found is that acceptance isn't a passive state. It's actually the beginning of something new. It's the moment when you stop looking backward and start looking forward with genuine openness to what wants to emerge. You're ready now for what Jung called your authentic life. The life that's actually yours rather than the life you thought you wanted, or the life society told you should want. Your twin flame burned away all the false layers, all the borrowed dreams, all the ways you were living for others' approval rather than your own soul's calling. What remains is essence. What remains is truth. What remains is you, more fully yourself than you've ever been. This version of you that emerged from the fire is capable of things the old version couldn't imagine. Deeper love without losing yourself, profound connection while maintaining sovereignty, intense vulnerability without collapsing into neediness. These are advanced relationship capacities that Jung believed most people never develop because they never undergo experiences intense enough to force this kind of growth. You earned this through suffering that would have destroyed less resilient souls. You earned this through staying conscious when it would have been easier to numb out. You earned this through continuing to believe in love, even after love broke you open and left you raw and bleeding. And now you get to live from this earned wisdom, creating a life that reflects everything you discovered through this brutal, beautiful initiation. If you've watched this video all the way to this final part, Carl Jung would say that's not a coincidence. You're here because some part of you recognized its own journey in these words, its own transformation in this description of what happens when you pass the twin flame test. And that recognition matters more than you might realize. Jung believed that consciousness seeking to understand itself is how the universe evolves. Every time a person like you gains insight into their own psychological process, every time someone integrates a profound experience instead of being destroyed by it, every time a soul completes the journey from fragmentation to wholeness, the entire collective consciousness of humanity advances by a fraction. You're not just healing yourself, you're healing the ancestral patterns that have kept humans trapped in unconscious relating for generations. Your twin flame experience wasn't just about you and them. It was about your soul agreeing before this lifetime to undergo an initiation that would crack you open wide enough to let more light in, more consciousness in, more authentic humanity in. You volunteered for this before you were born, knowing it would be brutal, but also knowing you were strong enough to not only survive it, but transform through it. Some part of you always knew this was coming. Maybe you felt different from other people even as a child, like you were here for something specific even though you couldn't name what it was. Maybe you had moments throughout your life where you sensed you were preparing for some great test, some crucible that would reveal what you're really made of. The twin flame connection was that test, and you passed. Not because you got them back, or because you completely let go, or because you reached some permanent state of enlightenment, You passed because you stayed conscious through the entire process, because you kept asking questions when it would have been easier to just accept simple answers, because you refused to close your heart even when keeping it open hurt more than anything you'd ever experienced. Jung spent his entire career studying people who'd been through psychological death and rebirth, and he found that these individuals carry a quality he called philosophical gold. They've been to places most people only visit in nightmares, and they came back with treasures, wisdom about the nature of love, insight into the human psyche, compassion for all the ways people suffer and survive. You carry this gold now. You might not feel particularly special or enlightened. You might still have hard days where the grief catches you off guard, or the loneliness feels overwhelming. That's normal. That's human. Jung wasn't talking about transcending humanity. He was talking about becoming more fully human, more conscious, more integrated, more able to hold the full spectrum of what it means to be alive. The gold you carry isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about having faced your shadow and survived the encounter. It's about having loved so deeply that it destroyed you, and then rebuilding yourself into someone who can love that deeply again without losing themselves in it. It's about knowing darkness intimately enough that you can help others find their way through their own darkness. You've become someone who can sit with people in their pain without trying to fix it or make it more comfortable. Someone who can witness authentic emotion without being threatened by intensity. Someone who tells the truth even when the truth isn't pretty or inspirational or easy to hear. These are rare qualities in a world that values comfort over growth, performance over authenticity, nice over true. Jung believed that people who successfully complete major psychological initiations often feel called to help others navigate similar territories. Not in a formal way necessarily, not as therapists or teachers or guides, but simply through being themselves and allowing their presence to give others permission to be authentic too. You don't have to do anything special with what you've learned. Just living from your integrated self is enough. But if you feel called to share your experience, to write about it or talk about it or create art from it or simply be more honest in your daily conversations about the full reality of what you've been through, Jung would say that's your soul's way of wanting to give back. You received so much through this experience, painful as it was, and now you have something to offer others who are where you once were, lost in the darkness, wondering if they'll ever find their way out. I want to thank you for being here, for having the courage to explore these depths with me, for being willing to look at your experience through a lens that honors both the pain and the transformation. If this video resonated with you, if you recognized your own journey in these words, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave a comment sharing what stage of the twin flame test you're in right now, or what insight hit you hardest, or simply what you're learning about yourself through this experience. Your story matters. Your transformation matters. And sometimes sharing it helps you integrate it even more deeply, while also helping someone else feel less alone in their own journey. Jung discovered that healing happens in community, that we need witnesses to our transformation for it to fully complete. So consider this video and its comment section a kind of sacred space where people who've been through the fire can recognize each other, acknowledge each other, remind each other that we're not crazy for feeling what we feel or experiencing what we experience. If you found value in this exploration of the twin flame test through Jung's lens, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. I create content about depth psychology, consciousness evolution, and the profound experiences that crack us open and force us to grow. And if you know someone who's struggling with their own twin flame experience, someone who needs to hear that there's meaning in their suffering and possibility on the other side of their pain, please share this video with them. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is offer someone a perspective that helps them see their experience differently. I also want you to know that there's an entire community of people doing this work, asking these questions, committed to staying conscious even when unconsciousness would be so much easier. You're not alone. You were never alone. Even in your darkest moments when you felt completely isolated in your experience, you were part of a larger human family of souls who've agreed to undergo these profound initiations so that consciousness itself can evolve. Jung called people like you the carriers of humanity's future. You're pioneering psychological territories that will eventually become common knowledge, making paths through wilderness that future generations will walk more easily because you mapped it first. Your suffering wasn't wasted. Your pain served a purpose larger than you can fully comprehend while you're still living through the aftermath. I want to leave you with one final thought that Jung shared near the end of his life. He said that the most important question we can ask isn't what should I do, but who am I becoming? Your twin flame experience gave you a crash course in becoming. It forced you to shed every false layer, every borrowed identity, every way you were living for others rather than for your own soul's calling. Who you're becoming now, in the aftermath of that stripping away, is who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. This is your authentic self emerging raw and real and more beautiful than any persona you ever performed. Trust this becoming. Trust that your soul knows what it's doing even when your ego is confused and frightened. Trust that you're exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn, becoming exactly who you came here to become. The twin flame test was never about them. It was always about you discovering depths within yourself you didn't know existed, about you developing capacities you didn't know you could develop, about you becoming conscious in ways that most people never achieve. You passed, and now you get to live from this new level of awareness, creating a life that finally feels authentically yours. Thank you so deeply for trusting me with your time, for being willing to go deep, for having the courage to keep your heart open even after it's been shattered. You're exactly the kind of person Jung believed could help transform human consciousness, one integrated soul at a time. I see you. I honor you. I recognize the gold you've been forged into through your fire. Until we meet again in the next exploration, take care of your beautiful, brave heart.